The 651st edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
Alton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered. Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. And he was fouled. Here we go. Lawson with a runner. No. The rebound. Hansbrough at the gun. Got it.
They were 4 for 24.
Hansbrough on a switch on Paulus. A deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Tipped away by Johnson. It's loose. Page. Johnson.
Oh, they're dancing in the aisles. They're high-fiving. They're celebrating. They're going bananas on Franklin Street.
Pass to Britt, 15 seconds to play. Up high to Page, gets a screen from Meeks. Page driving in on the left, high off the glass for two. Louisville with 7 seconds. Jones has it, goes left corner, Black's here for three. Back iron, 1 second to play. Stick up, no! Carolina wins it! The Tar Heels win it! 72-71. 6 seconds to go. Pinson comes front court. Pinson to May for the win. Got it! Luke May! He got it! 0.3 of a second! Luke May gives Carolina the 75-73 lead. Are you kidding me?
Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony here with you guys on a Saturday night, about 6 hours or so after Carolina goes on the road, storms back from a 16-point deficit to take down Virginia 85-80 in John Paul Jones Arena to get above 500 in the ACC and secure their most important and significant ACC win so far this season. And we're here to talk all about that because you've got really two things or two waves of emotions going through your mind. Of Carolina, played, I'm not going to say bad, but not up to par in the first half, but they really brought it in the second half, played their best 20 minutes of basketball, in my opinion, at least since the win over Kansas. And as I mentioned, it's their most significant ACC win so far this season. Hopefully there are many more like this to come as we make our way through the home stretch of conference play. We'll take a look at the box score. You'll hear from head coach Hubert Davis. We have our stat of the game, thoughts, takeaways, game balls, all the usual stuff we do on a game night recap. We do hope that everyone is staying warm so far. We know the cold weather is making its way into the Carolinas here tonight. It's big reason why Carolina, Virginia got moved up from 2 p.m. up to high noon, but luckily Carolina did not let that impact them as they win 85-80, their second straight win in John Paul Jones Arena after losing 8 of 9. This was supposed to be, I believe, the day that they were going to dedicate Tony Bennett's the court to Tony Bennett. I don't think that happened. I think the weather had a big part in that celebration, which is really unfortunate. Would have loved to have done this comeback with him being honored during the game at halftime, so on and so forth. But nonetheless, Carolina down as many as 16 points in the first half, down by 9 in the second half, or down by 9 at the half. They outscore Virginia in the second half, 51-37. And, yeah, you had Caleb Wilson having a big game. You got some contributions from Seth Trimble, Derek Dixon as well, but it was Jarin Stevenson who was the hero. He put on the Superman cape, scoring 17 points in the second half to help fuel the comeback in a half where Carolina shot 63% from the field, 5 of 11 from behind the 3-point line. I mentioned he had some help from the form of Caleb Wilson, who scored 20 points, was an efficient 8 of 12 from the field. He tied Tyler Hansbrough for the most 20-point games by a UNC freshman in the history of this decorated program, and a big reason why Carolina was able to complete the comeback, kind of like it was on Wednesday, better perimeter defense in the second half. Virginia was 6 of 15 from behind the 3-point line in the first half, but just 2 of 13 or 2 for 12 in the second half. Back-to-back games, Carolina has allowed the opponent to shoot or held the opponent under double-digit made threes. Back-to-back games, the opponent has shot 32% or worse from behind the 3-point line. That's the scene set. That's how you put it out there for Carolina. Greg Ward writes in a 40-19 run. Just a typical Carolina basketball run, if you will, but not one we've really seen Carolina go on at different points this year. Last week, I felt like was the tone setter for the rest of the season, and it was very negative. You lose 2 games to 2 teams that should never beat you. You play poor defense. It puts a negative feel around the program, and there was definitely that coming into this week. But this week you go 2-0, and it felt like if Carolina was going to turn the season around and really position themselves to compete to finish top 4 in a league that's projected to put 9 teams in the tournament, if they want to get back to playing for legitimate tournament seeding, they had to do so by winning this game today. It's not how you would have drawn it up. There's still a lot that you want to get cleaned up as you get closer and closer to the backstretch of league play. But nonetheless, this team overcame some adversity. Your young point guard grew up. Your freshman was there to make plays when he was asked to make plays. And Jarin Stevenson, the most unselfish player on this basketball team, a guy that has accepted whatever role has been thrown his way, gets rewarded for a big offensive performance in a win. And it's got the vibes as probably as high as they could be a week ago after we all felt mad at the world and really worried about the future after losing at California last week on the West Coast.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this team as possibly being a bubble team again this year. And now as we sit here and you look at it, I mean, Carolina's positioned pretty well. They're probably going to be a 5 seed the next time that Joe Lunardi releases his seed rankings. Now we'll have to wait and see. Maybe Carolina does stay a 6, but it feels like they're a solid 6. This was the one that could really change everything back in the right direction. If you were going to do that, you had to get this one because Georgia Tech and Syracuse really wasn't going to do anything for you. Those are games that you should be able to take care of. And again, today, Carolina rolling the starting lineup out that they did in the game against Notre Dame. How would it fare today? Fared, pretty well. I think this group once again did what it needed to do. Jaden Young, now he only played 7 minutes in this game, but it's like I said, even if you start him, you don't necessarily need to play him for a long period of time if other guys are really stepping up. And you get Luka Bogovac who steps up, Jarin Stevenson who steps up, and it makes a lot of sense why you don't see him play nearly as much. So I thought, really tremendous performances all the way around from a lot of the guys that Carolina needed to step up in that second half. Stevenson, really an unexpected guy that stepped up. I mean, every play that he made in the second half of this game. He had 17 points. He had 6. He was 6 of 9 from the field, 2 of 4 from beyond the arc. And all of that came in the second half. So that was huge for Carolina. And then you get Seth Trimble with all 11 of his points in the second half of this game. He had 16, but still 11 points in the second half. More importantly, 4 of 4 shooting in the second half, 2 of 2 from beyond the arc. Really set the tone early in the second half with a couple of threes for Carolina that put them squarely back into the game. And then Caleb Wilson making the play down the stretch that he needs to make. You knew that this was a guy that Carolina had to get the ball to as much as they had been focused on trying to get him the ball. One of the things that we had talked about on this podcast was that down the stretch in these games, you've really started to go away from Caleb Wilson. They've been doing, I guess, some things to try to deny him the basketball, but at the same time, it was just really your guys sort of, taking him out of the game because they wouldn't try to get him the basketball in certain scenarios. Today, much better job by Carolina. Now, granted, they didn't trap him nearly as much as you see in some other teams do, but at the same time, there was a clear intention to get him the basketball towards the end of the game. He ends up hitting the most important shot of the game for Carolina, and in a game where you were out-rebounded by a large margin in this one, 14, the advantage for Virginia on the glass. You find a way to come up with some of the most important rebounds in the game, some of the most important shots in the game, and you walk away with easily, in my mind, the most signature victory so far this season. I think Kansas was certainly a signature victory, but that came at home. This is a game on the road against a team ranked inside of the top 15, and I think a team that legitimately deserves to be ranked inside of the top 15, and he came back from down 16. What a massive, massive victory this is for the Tar Heels, and one that should have you feeling great if you're a Tar Heel fan.
Yeah, look, I feel pretty good. Tony Bennett's no longer their head coach. My feelings about Virginia have not changed. That's just one of those programs that I think for the remainder of my lifetime, because of how much they beat us up in the 2010s, I'm gonna hate. Excuse me, and I'm gonna want to beat, and to do it in their building, to do it in dramatic, come from behind fashion, where you made plays down the stretch, you got the stops you needed to get. There was a toughness there that I didn't know we would see from this team on the road, but they toughened up. They grew up in the second half, and that's what it takes to win on the road in this league. And you got to give them, a ton of credit, because I think after what happened in California, with the way that they came back and responded this week, I had kind of just accepted the fact this was going to be an inconsistent basketball team, one that played really, really well at home and really struggled to find its footing on the road. But now that you've won this game, now there's belief you can go to Georgia Tech and win. You can go to NC State and win.Maybe you can go to Duke and win, so on and so forth. That belief I don't think was there going into the game, and it wasn't there with about, at halftime when Carolina was down by 9 points. Let's take a look at the box score. It's a pretty one for Carolina. They shoot 49% from the field today. They were 30 of 61. Big reason why is because they shot 63% in the second half. Virginia shoots 45%. They were 29 of 64. The Heels were the better three-point shooting team. Back-to-back games, they've got double-digit made threes. They were 10 of 22 from behind the arc for an efficient 45%. As I mentioned, they held Virginia to 2 of 12 in the second half. They shoot 8 of 27 for the game. That works out to being just 30% shooting from the outside. Both teams left points at the foul line. It would have been the reason had Carolina lost. We would have been talking about that the most. Carolina just 15 of 22 from the stripe. They missed 3 free throws in the final minute or so. So this is now whatever the number game is post-Kentucky, but every game since the win at Kentucky, this team has shot 70% or worse from the foul line. On the flip side, Virginia only shot 70%. They were 14 of 20. Turnovers, a big difference in the game, and it favored Carolina. Virginia with 11 committed turnovers. Carolina scored 19 points off of them. On the other hand, after turning the ball over 3 times in their first 4 possessions, Carolina just 1 turnover the rest of the way. So 4 turnovers for the game. Virginia scored 2 points off of them. Rebounding advantage, Virginia 44-28 on the glass. It was 28-20 on the defensive glass, 16-8 on the offensive glass. So when they get this week off, it's going to be the biggest thing they talk about, I believe, in practice is becoming a much better defensive rebounding team, because they've allowed 34 offensive rebounds in their last 2 games. Second chance points in favor of Virginia, 17-7. Bench points in favor of Carolina. Only got bench production from Stevenson and Bogovats, but they outscored Virginia's bench 31-24. Points in the paint went Virginia's way, 40-34. Now, bench point total was 31-24. Fast break points 21-10 in favor of Carolina. Blocks in favor of Carolina 3-2. Steals in favor of Carolina 5-2. The Heels had 17 assists on 30 made baskets. Virginia with 14 assists on 29 made baskets. The game was tied 4 times. There were 4 different lead changes. Carolina led for just 7 minutes and 2 seconds, but it was enough to get the job done. We'll now transition to our quote of the game, where you'll hear from head coach Hubert Davis. And I thought what he said was very accurate when he was talking about the game in the postgame, where he simply stated he felt like in the first half Virginia kicked our tails, but we met the fight in the final 20 minutes.
I always say rebounding is the number one determining factor, of an outcome of a game. They got 16 offensive rebounds, but only 17 second chance points. 14 of them were in the first half. So I thought we did a better job of not letting them score when they got offensive rebounds. But we took care of the basketball and we were really efficient offensively. Scored, 51 points in the second half. And we got the stops when we needed to. One of the things I kept telling them is, in order to win this game, the ball goes up in the air, it's on the ground. Those 50-50 loose balls got to be all UNC. Virginia's such a physical, unbelievable team. And in the first half, I felt like they kicked our tail. In the second half, I felt like we met the fight.
That was a very accurate way to describe it. I tweeted it out. I thought Carolina got punked in the first half. I thought Henry Vassar exclusively really struggled. Arguably, you could say his worst game as a Tar Heel. Just 7 points, 1 rebound, 4 fouls in 29 minutes. Was not on the floor as Carolina completed the comeback. But it just felt like every loose ball, there were more Virginia guys near the ball than there were Carolina guys. And that's frustrating because that comes back to effort. That comes back to the urgency. And it looked like, again, Carolina just wasn't there. It wasn't there for them. But in the second half, you could tell there was a different switch. And look, Corey Alexander mentioned it going into halftime, that this has been a second-half team. This team has played better in the second half. I don't know what happens at the during that halftime. I don't know what gets said in the locker room. I don't know what they get fed. I don't know what happens. But they come out and they play better. And I think you could tell by the first media timeout, it was going to be a fight. Okay, Carolina got themselves back into the game, and they weren't going to go away, which was pretty impressive when you think about the fact that, you were down 10-2 at the first media timeout. You were down by 16 late in the first half. You gave up 4 runs of at least 7-0 scoring runs for Virginia or more. And you still overcame that at the end of the game. Carolina's up 67-62, a 9-over Virginia run. They take a 4-point lead. You probably feel like this game's going to go Virginia's way. But Carolina down the stretch, they made plays, and it really just started with the effort. They toughened up. I thought they did a much better job, taking away some of the dribble drive. I thought they were just moving their feet, playing defense with their body, but playing defense without fouling and just getting to the boards. I don't know how many times Carolina's won a basketball game and they've been out rebounded by 16. It's probably not many, but it does speak volumes of what this team is capable of doing when they can go on the road, be out rebounded by 16, and still find a way to come away with the win. It's something that has to be cleaned up, but that fight that you saw in the second half, if we can bottle that up and get that carrying over into the first half, and we start playing to as close as 40 minutes as possible, then I think this team can get back to where we thought this team was headed when they were 12-1 going into the Christmas break.
Yeah, it was very much like the Notre Dame game. The only difference was you were playing a much better team. You let up some transition threes. You had some ball screens where you simply didn't communicate with each other. And it got to the point where a lot of us were on social media saying, this is a team that is back to looking broken. And we thought, especially when they got down by 16, here we go again. We're going to be back to the same place that we were at with Hubert Davis, with this group all together. here, just a couple of days after feeling like maybe they found something against Notre Dame. But I love the second half effort from Carolina defensively. I thought they really turned things up. And again, just like you did in the second half against Notre Dame, took away the 3-point line. Virginia, 2 of 12 from beyond the arc in the second half. Now, part of it was that you were allowing guys to get to the basket, but you saw Carolina is able to contest those shots a little bit more. Carolina is able to, even if you do allow a basket, they're able to respond on the other end and match that, because they're not a great 3-point shooting team, but they're a team that can keep up with you through, the post and through some of the mid-range game. And so I just think Carolina came out. I mean, we the 40-19 run is the thing that everybody is talking about, and rightfully so from Carolina. But during that stretch, what did we see from Carolina that was so much different? You saw the pace pick up. You saw Derek Dixon really pushing. Carolina pushing off of misses or off of makes, not just misses. That's what you're looking for from this group. You're looking for that aggressiveness. And we said that's one of the things that you want to see in this game. I get it. Virginia's not the same team that they've been in years past. Still not a team that can handle a lot of pace. And Carolina showed them that was exactly what they were in this game, and really took advantage of that at some times. I thought that was amazing. You really saw, Derek Dixon in the second half of this game, I think, make some plays that were sorely needed. I mean, 8 points in the second half, 8 of his 11, 6 assists in the second half. Really did a great job of distributing. And as I said, one of the guys running the floor for Carolina when he was out there was Jarin Stevenson. He was sensational in all aspects. It wasn't just what he was doing from beyond the arc. This was a guy that was attacking the rim, a guy that was running off of makes for Carolina, and it really changed the game for this group. So just a tremendous effort from Carolina in that second half, and that's all we were asking for, was just show us the effort. That's where we get the most frustrated. It's not that you're losing games. It's that when we watch the games against Stanford and Cal, it felt like there were moments on the defensive end of the floor where there were business decisions that were being made, where guys weren't doing the things that they were being coached to do, or, there weren't the adjustments from Hubert Davis that there needed to be. And today I thought there were some adjustments in the second half. Hubert, riding the hot hand with Jarin Stevenson, playing Luka Bogavac a pretty significant amount of minutes because of what he was doing, not only on the offensive end, but he was contesting on the defensive end. You talked about a guy playing with his body defensively. That's what you saw from Luka Bogavac. Did a really good job of defending without fouling in that second half, and I think really did a tremendous job for Carolina. And so, yeah, what a game just overall for some of these guys. I mean, especially Jarin Stevenson and Luka Bogavac. You talk about the 31 points off the bench. It was all those two guys. Those were the only two guys that scored off the bench for Carolina. But everything that they did was important, it felt like, for Carolina in this game. So that's the thing. You get your normal starters that are stepping up for you, that you expect to have big games, but you get two guys off the bench. I mean, nobody expected Jarin Stevenson to score 17 in this game. We were looking, more around his season average for him, and we would be comfortable with that. And Luka Bogavac, I don't know how many people expected 14 from him in this one to go along with 1 assist and a rebound. I mean, this is what you're hoping that you're going to get from these guys moving forward, especially on a day where Henry Vassar was not at his best. So kudos to those guys for stepping up. A great second half for Carolina offensively, where they shoot 63% from the field. That's what's something that you're hoping, can carry over the rest of the season. You'd love that. But more importantly, you want to see that defensive effort carry over, and you want to see, that's the thing. It wasn't a good rebounding day by any stretch of the imagination for Carolina. But when they needed timely rebounds late in the game defensively, picking up the rebounds that they needed to, then ripping down an offensive rebound, Caleb Wilson doing a great job of rebounding over their big man, Grunlow in this game. That was a great job, pulling down that rebound on that missed free throw. So, again, timely plays from Carolina, ultimately the difference in this one.
I don't think anyone has benefited more from getting moved to the bench than Luka. I think he's a lot more comfortable and is having a bigger impact coming off the bench than he was having as a starter. Scored his 14 points in 28 minutes. He adds a secondary ball handler coming off the bench as well with the shooting. And so you saw him really step up in a major way today. Let's get to the stat of the game. This one to me was very easy from a from a box score perspective. I went with points off turnovers. Carolina had 19 points off 11 Virginia turnovers. Meanwhile, Virginia with just 2 points off of Carolina's 4 miscues. And as I mentioned earlier on in the program, there were 3 turnovers in the first 4 possessions of the game. So the way the game started with the amount of turnovers that Carolina committed, it felt like it was going to be one of those games where Carolina just did not value the basketball. But, we mentioned this, I believe it was in the Notre Dame recap or maybe the Virginia preview. This team's on pace to threaten the all-time record for fewest turnovers committed per game. And you saw that show up in a big way, just 1 turnover the rest of the way, and it came in the second half. So they played well over, I believe, 20 minutes or so without committing a turnover. The biggest thing is the pressure. And, they were active, I thought. They did get a turnover out of the full court press that they were able to get some sort of points off of. I can't remember if I think it was a Luka Bogovac 3 is what they ultimately got. But they were really active, I thought, with their hands. How many times did you see a Virginia guard drive the basket, and Carolina's length really impacted the game? They got their hands on balls, and they were able to get out, run, and get those easy points. Like you get 19 points off of turnovers, you get 21 fast break points. That's vintage Carolina basketball. That's what we're used to seeing. That's what Carolina fans expect to see, is a team that, when they force turnovers, they look to run and they look to score off of them. And Carolina was able to do that today in a major way. But just as equally as important, where it was them taking care of the basketball after an early stretch. So I find it hard to believe that if they weren't plus 17 in that category, they would have been able to come back from 16 points down to win a game on the road in a building where they have struggled at the majority of our lifetime. Let's get into more thoughts, more takeaways from Carolina's 85-80 win at Virginia that improves the team to 16-4, 4-3 in the ACC. Just want to just follow up on some Jarin Stevenson stuff. He scored 17 points, all of them coming in the second half, was 6 of 9 from the field, was 2 of 4 from 3, makes all 3 of his foul shots. But you're talking about, only playing 16 minutes in the game total. So he scored all 17 points, so averaging over literally a point per minute. You break it down even further, he played 12 minutes in the second half. So you're talking about there was just a point in time where he was quite simply Carolina's best player. And look, there were a couple of shots that the ball got funneled his way that, he had open looks at the basket he was unable to make. And that's a big reason why I think he got moved to the bench. But there were some other times, man, he made some big shots down the stretch. What you love to see with a guy like him is to me, he's the best example of what unselfish looks like in the modern game, where this is a guy that, was played a pretty impactful position at Alabama, transfers to Carolina, starts a handful of games because of the Seth Trimble injury. And, when he got moved to the bench, he could have pouted. He could have whined and cried and complained and made it about himself, but he just did what he was asked to do. And he's done that every time he's taken the floor. He had a big offensive game at SMU, but that goes kind of forgotten about because Carolina loses the game, and we were all yelling about his defense. Well, today he steps up, He has another big scoring game, as we talked about, with the 17 points, and he's the guy that's getting mobbed in the locker room. He's the guy that is getting a lot of praise on the social medias, if you will, for helping fuel a comeback. He's the type of glue guy that every team needs, the kind of culture guy that I think Hubert Davis has lacked at times when things have gotten away from him during the middle of a season after, a bad stretch. And so, look, we know this is not what he's going to be on a consistent basis, but how many teams in college basketball have a 6'11" wing that can guard the 2 through 5 if he had to, is really effective guarding the 3 through 5, and can score the ball the way he can score the ball, rebound the way he can rebound at times, and then, close out on perimeter shooters the way he took away some perimeter shots there in the second half. And in the year where we see players leave and transfer over money, leave and transfer over playing time, he is proof that even if you buy into your role, no matter what that role is, you're going to be rewarded for it at some point. And today was that day, because quite simply, Carolina does not win this game without the big second half from Jarin Stevenson.
And what's crazy is you go back to when he was introduced to the game, and you tweeted it out. We both said it. He ends up letting up 2 baskets to Fitz DeRitter, and we're thinking to ourselves, oh boy, this could be a long day for Jarin Stevenson. This just does not seem like a matchup that he's going to be able to take advantage of. And I mean, look, DeRitter, heck of a player. There's no doubt about that. But you were hoping that you would see more from Jarin Stevenson, that he would be a guy that would be able to guard out there on the perimeter against a guy like DeRitter. And you saw as the day went along, he became more and more competitive on that end of the floor and really altered some shots, really changed some things on that end. But then to the impact that he has offensively, to score 17 points, to shoot 6 of 9 from the field, and really to get to a point where you felt like the offense really had to be run through you. There was a point in this second half where that was Carolina's best chance to score, was to run their offense through Jarin Stevenson. And for them to have that much trust, but mainly for him to step up in that moment and put together that type of performance, is huge. I mean, 2 of 4 from beyond the arc, but it felt like both of those threes were very, very important. They were ones that I think, because of some of the other shots that he took from beyond the arc, you were probably saying to yourself, why are you shooting that? But they end up going down. Both of them are huge, and it's part of the reason why Carolina walks away. And then the efficiency at the foul line. I mean, this might be Carolina's best foul shooter. I mean, this is a guy in each of the last 2 games now. He's been perfect from the foul line. So there's not much that you can really bank on from the foul line, but maybe Jarin Stevenson really is that guy. Love the way, as I said earlier, that he ran the floor. He got a couple of buckets in transition just because of the effort that he was bringing running down the floor. And that's what you were wanting to see based off of what we saw in the first half, where Carolina wasn't even running back on defense, let alone offense. And so I thought he was tremendous in this game. This is the reason why you went out and got a guy like Jarin Stevenson and brought him in, was because you knew that he was the correct type of guy to come out and say, look, we're not going to have you play the exact same role that you did with Alabama, but we're going to have you play a role that we think fits you a little bit better. And he was willing to adjust to that. And as the season has gone along, I think you've really started to see him adjust to that role. I mean, this is 2 really strong games in a row for him. I know the other game, last game, he only scored 8 points, but I really felt like he was impactful in that game against Notre Dame as well. If you could just find a middle ground and you can become that consistent guy that can score, even 8, 9 points a game, I think we're feeling pretty good about where Jarin Stevenson is. We're feeling pretty good about where this team is. But on a day like today, to have him be the guy that's capable of stepping up in a moment like this and put up a 17-point performance when Carolina really needs it, it says a lot about him, and it says a lot about why Carolina went out and got him this offseason. So an absolutely outstanding performance, and one that I don't think we're going to forget about anytime soon, especially this season, if this season turns back in the right direction for Carolina.
Want to talk about the second half defensive effort before we get into the Derek Dixon portion of today's show. I thought Carolina was tremendous in the second half. And look, the numbers aren't gonna they're not gonna blow you away in totality. I mean, Virginia shot 45% from the field. They were 13 of 29. We mentioned the 3-point defense or the 3-point shooting, though, just 2 for 12. And they were still +6 on the glass in the second half. But the big thing was Carolina forced to 7 of those 11 turnovers. I just thought more than anything, and you kind of go back to the quote of the game that we had from Hubert, I thought they were tougher. I thought they fought more. I thought there were times that Virginia, Mallory or, to Thomas, whoever, and they just made a play. They made a shot. They were falling out of bounds, doing whatever. Even the Ritter. There were just some times where you could have to just say, look, man, they're good players. That's a good basketball team on the other side. But the energy was there. And the biggest thing, I thought the communication was there because, in the first half, when it looked like Virginia was going to shoot lights out, what was happening? Carolina, had 2 times in transition. They don't pick up the trailer. There was a couple of times on a drive, they overhelped too much. The ball gets put where the ball needs to go because they're a well-coached team. You're giving up open threes. It felt like for the majority in the second half, everything was at least contested. It felt like Carolina was in the right spots. They were doing the right things, doing what they needed to do with ball screens, making sure that they were switching it the right way. Whatever it was, rotating, closing out, on and on and on. And I wonder how much of this, stems from the vocal leadership that now exists with Caleb Wilson. I thought Seth Trimble was very vocal at times as well. I thought Luka Bogovac even. It feels like now that they know that they have their voice, I think now maybe other people or other players are more empowered to maybe step up and voice their opinion. So, look, outside of the 3-point defense, which was stellar, it's a big reason why Carolina was able to come back and win the game. But, it wasn't the best defensive effort. It wasn't the most overwhelming defensive effort. You still gave up 80 points in the ball game, but only 37 there in that second half. And, I think Carolina found something, from what happened the final 9 minutes going back to Cal. You had to bottle that up, carry it over into Notre Dame. And for the most part, they were able to keep Notre Dame in check. You would come on the road tonight, play really, really strong in the second half. Is this team going to get back to where they were 3 weeks ago defensively? That answer is probably no, but it does feel a lot better than where we felt this time last Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, Carolina last Saturday, we were feeling like, hey, you created some turnovers in that second half. You were better defensively in that second half. But a big part of it was that you were playing the 1-2-2 trap. And we know that's not a way that Carolina is going to play for an extended period of time in a game that they aren't losing. We know that from, how many times we have said and begged, please play more of that trap, because when you do, it is successful. And that panned out again today. Carolina, first time they ran it, created a turnover and made you wonder, why are we not seeing this a little bit more? But I digress. The second half defense was much better. And big part of it was that there was a focus to run them off of the 3-point line. 2 of 12 from beyond the arc in the second half. And don't get it wrong, they were looking from the outside. They had a pretty decent amount of looks from out there. Wasn't quite half of their attempts, but still, it pretty decent amount. And Carolina is able to run them off. Played much better on the perimeter in terms of communication. That was something that I think you really saw in that second half. I mean, you were talking about how you saw guys being more vocal on the court just in general, but I think that was the thing. You needed to have the right communication in that second half against this team. Carolina does. They pick up some of these guys in transition, everything like that, and it ends up working out with one of their better defensive halves that they've had here recently. The other areas where they did a really good job, 7 turnovers. You talked about the turnovers in general, 11 forced in the game. Well, only 4 in the first half, 7 in the second half. In the most important half of the game, you were the team that was more aggressive. You were the team that was creating those turnovers and creating some of those points in transition for Carolina, some of those points off of turnovers. That was huge for this group. And then the offensive rebounding, you weren't great, taking away that offensive rebounding from Virginia. They had 7 in the second half. But the more important thing, second chance points in that second half, just 3. So even when they were pulling down offensive rebounds, most of them were coming up empty. Most of them were turning into absolutely nothing because of the effort that you were bringing in that area. I thought, for the most part, Carolina did a decent job of taking away some of the dribble drive stuff, especially towards the end of the game. That was when they really started to shut it off in the final 4 minutes of the game. I think that's really where they started to take away their ability to just get to the basket easily. And I think that was ultimately the difference for Carolina in this game, was that they were able to stop that. They were able to limit some of those offensive rebounds right down the stretch. And it ends up with Carolina getting the victory because of it. So, again, that's an effort that we want to see carry over into other halves. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're not asking for that. But just be better than what you were here recently against Stanford, against Cal, where it felt like you weren't even competing on that end of the floor. This group looked like a group that was competitive at times in that first half. At other times it wasn't. But they bounced back in the second half, and that's the most important thing, is that in the most important half of the game, you looked like a competent defensive team. So hopefully that's something that Carolina can carry over moving forward.
Let's get to the Derek Dixon portion of tonight's podcast, because our young point guard, I think he really grew up in the second half. And I was having a conversation with one of our coworkers the other day, and one of our favorite things to do is to kind of like compare current players to former players. And I told him that I saw some Kendall Marshall and Derek Dixon. It's not a coincidence that our good buddy Greg Ward, fellow bald man as well, writes in, Dixon has some Kendall Marshall in him. He will only get better. Those passes over the top of the UVA transition defense was beautiful. And I do think, why do I look at Derek Dixon and see Kendall Marshall? One, he's not quick of foot. He's not Ty Lawson. He's not Raymond Felton. He's not Kobe White. He's not going to beat you down the floor with the speed. I think he can beat you down the floor with the pass. Kendall Marshall is the best skip-ahead passer I've ever seen run Carolina's offense. And I've watched every point guard play every game since Ty Lawson's freshman season. So, no, I didn't see a lot of Felton, Coda, those, Ford, Jimmy Black, Kenny the Jet Smith, on and on and on. But I've seen some high-level point guards come through Chapel Hill. And I'm not saying that's what Derek Dixon's going to end up being, but the comparison is there. You could see it. And those 7 assists today were magnificent. They were needed. What I love more than anything is the toughness that he displays as a freshman, man. Like, this kid ain't afraid of the moment. That was evident after what he did at Kentucky, where he, scored 5 points in the final minute, helped Carolina escape Rupp Arena with the win. Carolina doesn't win this game without him tonight. And look, he was only 4 of 11 from the field, but was 2 of 3 from 3. Got you 4 rebounds, 7-to-1 assist turnover ratio in 33 minutes. He's got the point guard position on lock. There's no looking back. There's no turning back. This is obviously, 3rd straight game he started. 3rd straight game he's been in double figures. So Carolina's getting more scoring punch from the point guard spot. It really does make you wonder what took Hubert Davis so long to make this switch. Probably just trying to exhaust everything he could get out of Kyan Evans before he had to potentially lose his confidence if he moved him to the bench. But, this was going to be probably something that if Carolina was going to round into form, they were going to need Derek Dixon to become a plus at that position after a couple of weeks spent with you getting minus at that position. where Kyan Evans was he was a liability on the floor, and was a liability once again today. But you can overcome that when Derek Dixon plays the way that he plays, and so there's going to be some bumps in the road. There's going to be some high moments. There's going to be some low moments. He's a freshman playing at Carolina, and you could tell that I think Hubert has not put as much on his plate. But hopefully this next week, there should be more that's added to him. Like if he's going to be the point guard, he's got to become the leader. He's got to become that extension of the head coach on the court. But man, I love his toughness. I love his confidence. And it looks like Hubert Davis has found his point guard for the foreseeable future to run this team and run his program.
Yeah, I mean, you'd like to say that it's for the next few years, but you just don't know ultimately what's going to happen, how his NBA stock is going to potentially rise. This was the type of performance that we were hoping for, that you would be able to get consistently out of the point guard spot. And you've gotten that here recently. Since they've gone to him in the starting lineup, I mean, it has been consistently steady performances at the point guard position. And you could argue that today was maybe his best performance because of what he did sharing the basketball. I mean, 7 assists in this game, 6 of them in that second half, and really just completely changed how Carolina was playing. They started playing more up and down once he was on the floor, once he was taking control of everything on that end. And I think that's what you need to see from him, more of an effort to push the pace, because this team can play at that type of pace. You've got Seth Trimble, who's always wanting to play at that type of pace. You've got Caleb Wilson, who is more than apt to play at that type of pace. And even Henry Vassar is a guy that runs the floor and can handle playing at that type of pace. So, I mean, those are your best players, and they succeed with that type of offense. So let's see a little bit more of it. Derek Dixon was able to unlock that today. Yeah, was he super efficient from the field? No. 4 of 11, no one's going to write home about that. But in the second half, when Carolina needed him to step up and be a little bit more efficient, he goes 3 of 6 from the field and 1 of 1 from beyond the arc. So I think he's evolving into a really special player. I think at this point, what you're wondering is he a guy that, can handle playing the amount of minutes that he played tonight and playing that for the remainder of the season for the most part? Can he average 32, 33 minutes a game for Carolina? Because the guy that's behind him, there's just no way that he is finding confidence this season. I don't see it. I know there are some people that are blaming the fan base as the reason why he can't find confidence. I think that's ludicrous. I think that's on him. He's got to be able to be confident in himself. He shouldn't be focused on what people are saying on social media. I don't think he is, but I think that that's something that he's got to find within himself. And until he finds that, it's going to be really hard to play him for Carolina and play him significant minutes, because there just isn't any consistency to his game. You're seeing the consistency with Derek Dixon. That's really all we were asking for out of that point guard spot. And now it doesn't feel like you're playing 4-on-5 at times when you have your whoever is at point guard on the floor. And Derek Dixon was part of that earlier in the season, but as expected, he has progressed as the year has gone along. I love the switch when they did it. I think now it's really paying off for Carolina, and this is one of the main reasons why you should feel confident that Carolina can get better as the season goes along, because their point guard is getting better as the year goes along.
Yeah, look, I still would like to see some lineups with Dixon on the floor and Kyan Evans off the ball, and you run in some flares. You really run in some action to where all Kyan Evans is doing is catching and shooting. Because I know I've said this and I sound like a broken record. They need his shooting. Like they can finish top 4 in the league, maybe without it. We're not going deep, I think, into the tournament without having someone really step up as someone that they can count on to give them some perimeter shooting. But this is Derek Dixon's team. And whether, we can agree, disagree, whatever on when Hubert made the switch, but that switch has been made. It's committed. You just stay with it. Same thing with starting lineup. Like, I got a couple texts from Ashton, my little brother. He's a coach in training who's commented a little bit here on the YouTube stream here tonight. He was texting me saying, you got to put Luka Bogovac back in the starting lineup. No, you don't. Like, I like where this lineup is at. I like what Jaden Young offers. I like what he presents. There's energy. There's effort. He competes. He can shoot the ball. He's going to get in the stance and he's going to guard. But if he doesn't play much after the first minutes, it's not going to necessarily kill you in ways that some other guys would. And so, look, they're still tinkering some things. They're still trying to figure some things out, which is not ideal on, look at my watch. It's January 24th. But that's where Carolina is at right now. But you needed this from Derek Dixon. You've gotten it from him. His confidence is as high as it's been all year long. And I think this team is starting to rally around him as him being their point guard. We do have to discuss like one negative before we get to our discussion topic, hand out some game balls, and then get out of here. What happened on the glass today cannot happen again. And first off, let me just look. I know, and I tweeted this out. I know that Virginia entered the game statistically the best rebound team in the conference, and I don't want to take any away from that bunch. It's a really good basketball team, and they're going to be a good basketball team for many years to come because Ryan Odom is that dude. But there is not a scenario where you should be minus 16 on the glass in total, minus 8 defensive glass, minus 8 offensive glass. That leads you to be in minus 10 in second chance points. Henry Vassar today was bad. You could argue, even without the foul trouble, borderline unplayable, was a net negative, I thought, for Carolina at times on the court today. He grabbed a rebound. He entered the game averaging 9.2. And so Carolina did not get the rebounding production from him that you got. Even Caleb Wilson today finishes the game with just 4 rebounds. There were 2 separate possessions in this game where Virginia got 4 shots off because we could not rebound the ball. Can't happen. And look, Carolina won, and that needs to be celebrated. But I think, this is probably something that when Hubert Davis goes back and watches the film and grades the film, he can look at it and still harp on his guys when they get back to Chapel Hill and they get on the practice court. I don't know what the schedule's like for the upcoming week, but we gave up a lot of offensive rebounds to Notre Dame. Hey, a lot of long shots, long rebounds. That's a quirky type of thing. Today, there were a lot of shots at the rim that Carolina just did not grab. And having 2 possessions where you give up 3 offensive rebounds can't happen, should not happen. So, hopefully this is just an anomaly. I don't know how many more times Carolina's going to have a game where Vassar has a rebound. Credit Jonathan Powell. And again, this is why I tell, he needs to play because, while yes, he's a shooter and I think he's the best shooter on the roster. Maybe Luka Bogovac is challenging for that spot. He doesn't score in the ball game, plays 10 minutes, grabs 7 rebounds. So found another way to go impact winning. I love guys like that. How can you impact the game when the ball's not going through the bucket? And he went and did that. And quite simply, if he doesn't do that, does Carolina win the game? I don't know. But this cannot happen again moving forward. So you love that you can find a way to win because you're proving that you can find other ways to when you don't play your best. You don't rebound your best. But I don't know if this team can win many nights when they're minus 16 on the boards, minus 8 on the defensive glass, minus 8 on the offensive glass.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the main things that you take away from this game if you're a Carolina fan and you're looking for things that Carolina's got to work on. I mean, rebounding-wise, how do you pull down 28 rebounds in a game? I mean, we're used to there are times where Carolina's pulling down 28 offensive rebounds, pulling down 28 total rebounds in halves. I mean, we have gotten used to that over the years. And in this game, you just couldn't find a rhythm on the glass. But, Jonathan Powell ends up stepping up. Maybe that's a guard that you can rely on to be able to rebound. You got to get more from Henry Vassar. And, yeah, this was one of his off games. And here's the thing. he's allowed to have an off game. Like, my thing is, you shouldn't panic about this. I know there are going to be people that are going to say, oh yeah, when he plays, certain teams that can match his length, he's really going to struggle. I don't think that's necessarily the case. Go back to the game against Flory Badunga and Kansas. He was the better player on the floor that entire night. And so I think it was just an off game for him. But on a day where you needed to come up with timely rebounds, you were able to do so. You just got to be a little bit more consistent across the board because, I don't know how many other games you are going to be able to give up 16 offensive rebounds and find a way to win. Now, it's back-to-back games. You've given up 34 offensive rebounds in 2 games. But at the same time, I think if you're in another close game like this and the rebounding margin is that big and you let up that many offensive rebounds, it's going to be really hard to run this back and find a way to be able to win the game. You have to shoot like Carolina did in that second half in order to make up for the fact that you simply cannot rebound. And that's not the point that you want to be at if you're Carolina. You want to be the aggressor. That's an area where we've talked about it. Rebounding is all effort, man. And I'm not saying that there wasn't effort from Carolina in that area, but it just felt like every loose ball, there was someone from Virginia that was looking to run it down, that was aggressive going to the basketball. That's what you need to see from Carolina. You need to go up with both hands because there were times where, Caleb Wilson tries to one-hand one and it ends up falling into the arms of a Virginia player. There were a couple other times. We've seen this countless times for Carolina. Get one hand on it, the ball goes out of bounds and ends up sticking with Virginia. Those are things that you got to be able to avoid in some of these games. Be strong, ripping down those rebounds. And ultimately, Carolina is still a pretty good rebounding team. Maybe this was just a bad matchup, but minus 16 on the glass is pretty damning. And then, the other thing that you wanted to talk about here, and, I'll transition us to it, is free throw shooting. And it's still an area that Carolina is not necessarily great at. In this game, they shoot just 68% from the foul line. And look, you got lucky that the team on the other side didn't shoot well at the foul line either in the second half. They missed 5 free throws. That's ultimately the difference in the game for Carolina. So, there were a couple of shots down the stretch where Carolina had a chance to make sure that they put Virginia away, made things a little bit interesting. You don't want to see that moving forward for Carolina. And ultimately, I think that's something that we just have to deal with. But the thing that sucks is that you have to pray that the team on the other side is going to shoot poorly as well from the foul line. It works today, but in some of these games, especially, those games against Duke that you're going to have to play, game against Louisville that's on the schedule, game against Clemson that's on the schedule, some of the tougher teams in the ACC, you've got to be able to knock down free throws when it matters the most. And avoid some of those moments that we saw yet again today where Carolina misses the front end of a 1-and-1 and it basically turns into a turnover. So, hopefully we're taking some incremental steps towards that. Jarin Stevenson, as we said, shooting well from the foul line. Luka Bogovac shot well the other night. Not perfect today, just 3 of 5 from the line, but hopefully that's an area that Carolina can be a little bit better in some of these more important games here that they're going to play down the stretch of the season.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that Carolina's got a top 20 offense according to KenPom. This top 20 as of today, they're averaging 123.4 points per 100 possessions, and they're the third worst free throw shooting team in the league. Like, how much more efficient could this offense be if they were converting on their freebies? But it just kind of just shows you, even with all their issues, this offense, still top 20 in the country, is kind of hard to fathom. All right, let's get to our discussion topic. Don't want to spend too much time. We're running late here on a Saturday night. But I think, it's a really good way to talk about it because Carolina secured big non-con wins over Kansas, over Kentucky. Kansas, when Darren Peterson plays, looks like they're going to the Final Four. Kentucky, they've lost Jalen Lowe, Jaden Quayton's, his return is up in the air. But they've won, I think, 5 in a row. They're looking kind of like Kentucky's going to the tournament. They may not be what they were supposed to be, but those wins are going to hold up. Those wins are going to be significant in terms of how Carolina gets evaluated for the NCAA tournament and your faith they can do some damage when they get into the tournament. And so the discussion topic kind of is, how does this win compare to those wins over Kansas and Kentucky? Are they bigger? I mentioned Ashton was commenting on the YouTube stream. He commented right here. Arguably the most important road win for Hubert Davis since his first year against Duke. Is that in play? Because Carolina's, they won year 3 at Duke to secure an ACC regular season championship, but in a year that we've defined as make or break for the head coach, after the 2 rough showings on the road last week, that really kind of felt like he was at a crossroads. You then come back and you go 2-0 this week. You win in a building where he's now won more in the last 3 years in Charlottesville than Carolina did in a 12-year span, featuring the end of the Roy Williams run, which is just mind-boggling to think about. So when you look at this win, how does it compare to the wins over Kansas and Kentucky? And is it up there to be maybe the second biggest road win of Hubert Davis's 5-year tenure as Carolina's head coach?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I said it earlier. I kind of gave this away. I didn't even look yet at the discussion topic before I revealed it.
That's nice to know.
Yeah. Look, I hadn't scrolled down to that point yet, but I let it be known that I thought it was the biggest win that Carolina's had this season. Because, again, you go back to that Kansas game, and, yeah, that was huge for Carolina. There's no doubt about that. Really set a tone for the year. But the thing is that game was at home. This game was on the road in a place where you have not had a lot of success. And I get it. You won there last year, so maybe you felt like Hubert had found something. Still, there probably wasn't a lot of confidence going into this game. And then you factor in that this is coming after the losses that you took last weekend or last week. I mean, I think it's just massive for him. I mean, this could be a job-saving type win for Hubert Davis. And so when you talk about that, I mean, yeah, it's right up there with that game against Duke. Now, ultimately, do I think that this game is going to be what turns Carolina into a national title contender? I don't know about that. I don't know if we circle back. Maybe we do. Maybe we do eventually circle back and say, this was the game where everything changed for Carolina, and all of a sudden they turned things in the right direction and became one of the best teams in the entire country. I think it is possible because you've got a player like Caleb Wilson, but I can't get to that point here just yet. I still think this was a huge, huge win, though, for Carolina. It's bigger than the Kentucky win because I think this is a better team than Kentucky. As you said, I think Kentucky is going to go to the NCAA tournament, but I believe Virginia is probably the better team. And I think, for Carolina, might be the tougher place to play in terms of the history that they had at John Paul Jones Arena. And then, the game against Kansas is right there, but I lean with this Virginia win. So significant win for Hubert Davis, one that they desperately needed. And also another thing that has to factor into it, you were down by 16 and found a way to come back to win this game. That is the biggest comeback in the history of John Paul Jones Arena. That is stunning. So what a great win for this group.
Yeah, I think there's an argument for the Kansas win. There's an argument for the Kentucky win. These are ACC games, man. These are what you play all year for, is what you build for to win games like this, to have moments like today. And to just think about where you were a week ago, and you flash forward a week on the road, hostile environment, and you're able to come back and get a win. It speaks volumes about what this team is made of, the character, the fight. And it's a reflection of Hubert. And, look, man, I have a very complicated relationship with our head coach. I do, because he's not Roy Williams. Roy Williams to me was a god. Everything that he says, my life hung by his word, still to this day. The highlights of my life have been getting a chance to watch basketball in the same gym as Roy Williams. That's the kind of reverence that man carries. So when last week happens, I meet the fan base where they are, and the fan base was angry. They were frustrated. They were volatile. And I said some things that I'm not going to say I didn't believe, But I mean, it was very critical, very hard on a guy that I'm rooting for. I'm rooting for Hubert Davis to have moments like this. I'm rooting for Hubert Davis to have wins like this. I want to win with Hubert Davis. And so when these moments happen, it gets you, just makes you wonder, like, can we just put this all together? And can we just put this, out there more consistently to have moments like this? Because he's everything I want in my head coach. He stands for everything that I still believe in, what Carolina basketball still believes in. And so I would say, yeah, because when you're down 16, guess what that's what the topic was going to be. How we lost. What's this do for Hubert Davis job security? That's where we were headed, because that's all that our audience, and we've got a pretty large one with us here tonight, that's all they were going to talk about is fire Hubert. He's not the guy, so on and so forth. And at some point, you can't keep running from that. And we're not afraid to have those conversations here on the podcast. And so if this is the win that turns it around and this team goes on to finish top 4 in the league, heck, top 2, they battle Duke to the final week for the ACC regular season, and they're playing for a really high seed come Selection Sunday, then we'll look back at this game as the game that may have turned his career around in totality. And so, yeah, I think it's, as much as I think I hate Kansas, hate Kentucky more, this game carries more weight because it's a conference game, and you weren't coming off bad losses. You weren't staring at 3 out of 4 losses when you may have lost to Kansas, when you may have lost to Kentucky. So, yeah, I think it's the biggest win so far this season. I would not put it above the win at Duke 2 years ago that helped you secure an ACC regular season title. But if you want to say it's the 3rd biggest road win of his young coaching career, I won't argue that. I think I could agree with that, because this could be the win that jumpstarts them and during the back half of the ACC season to really get them where we thought we were going to be when we were 12-1 heading into Christmas. Let's hand out some game balls, then we'll get out of here for this edition of the podcast. I'll go first. I'll take the layup. I'll take Jarin Stevenson. 17 points, 6 of 9 from the field, 2 of 4 from 3, 3 of 3 from the foul line, 1 rebound, no assists, 3 fouls in his 16 minutes. As I mentioned, though, all 17 of his points came in the second half. All 17 of those points came in just 12 minutes. So Jarin Stevenson gets my game ball for the road win not at Kentucky, at Virginia.
Yeah. Man, this is tough, man. And I think there are a lot of really good candidates. I'm going to give it to Derek Dixon. I think 11 points, 7 assists, 4 rebounds for him. What a performance from him. And again, I credit a lot of what Carolina was able to do pace-wise in the second half. That really affected Virginia to Derek Dixon. I thought he was fantastic in that second half. He was a game changer for Carolina. Exactly what you needed at the point guard spot. 8 big points in that second half as well, where he scores he goes 3 of 6 from the field, 1 of 1 from beyond the arc for the game in total, 4 of 11 from the field, 2 of 3 from beyond the arc. But this guy really is evolving into the player that we were hoping Carolina would have at the point guard spot. We thought it was going to be Kyan Evans that was going to eventually be that guy. It is the freshman Derek Dixon who is stepping up and playing that role for Carolina. He was tremendous in 33 minutes. And by the way, I know this is a stat that a lot of people don't love, but he had the best plus minus of anybody on the court in this game, plus 22. That definitely deserves a shout out. He was just that impactful when he was out there. So I'm going to give my game ball in this game to Derek Dixon.
That's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast. In the meantime, guys, we will direct you guys to the website. That's heeltoughblog.com. Full coverage of the game can be found. I had you ready to go this morning. Early morning preview, had you with the recap. It's on the website for you to go check that back out, as well as we continue to take you through the basketball season. The team has a week off. So going to hopefully get an article up about their NCAA tournament seeding at this point into the season. Maybe some other opinion articles as well, as we continue to take you through the basketball season. Anthony has you covered on the football side of things. Feels like the roster is all but set. And so with that being said, we will be starting to get you ready for the upcoming spring practice of Bill Belichick's second season in Chapel Hill. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform, just search the Four Corners Podcast and we will pop up there. We strongly encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any audio editions of the show. If you're a video consumer of the pod, best way to keep up with us, like and follow the Facebook page at Heel Tough Blog. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Heel Tough Blog. Follow me on Twitter at H2E_Josh. The second we go live, you can jump in and be a part of our conversation. As I mentioned, a week off for the program does not mean a week off for the podcast. We've already got us an edition of Ashton's Analysis booked, so you will get to hear from the third member of the team talking about the ACC season so far. We will do an audio edition of the podcast about where Carolina stands NCAA tournament-wise. I wonder how much today's win might impact some of those current projections. And we're working on some interviews. Going to try to get Shelby Swanson on. We're trying to lock down an interview with Joel Berry and some others. So the team may be off, but we're not off. We'll be here all week long producing even more great Carolina basketball coverage. But with that, folks, this is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for both watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.